Our distinguished speaker, Blanche and our interviewer for this evening, Michael Jacobs. A hearty welcome to both of you. I now get to introduce them, and I'll be brief because you want to hear them talk, not me talk. So, firstly, Blanche is the author of 7 books, including 4 novels, and these works collectively have won a number of literary prizes, including the PEN Golden Jubilee Award, the Age Novel of the Year Award, the Essay Premiers Award, and the Australasian Prize for Commonwealth Literature. So Blanche comes to us with a very deep and distinguished history in writing. Blanche's Mediator, a biography of Sir Richard Kirby, was published in 1977 to national acclaim, and the 1982 Robert J Hawke, a biography, was both a national bestseller and the winner of several awards. Blanche has done many things in her life. These are but a few. She's served on the board of the ACT Arts Advisory Council, the Copyright Agency Limited, the Australian Film Commission, and has been chair of the Australian Society of Authors, which I think is just a quick indication of the depth of her interest and involvement in literary affairs. As the Auscare Goodwill Ambassador from 1992 to 1996, she wrote of the plight of refugees from Indochina, the former Yugoslavia and Afghanistan. She is a patron of the Australia-China Friendship Society in New South Wales and also the patron of INALA, a Rudolf Steiner organisation catering for people with severe disabilities. And now to Michael Jacobs. This is the 3rd interview that Michael's conducted on behalf of the Hawke Centre, and he's always put enormous effort into those interviews, and we're very grateful that he's been prepared to do this one tonight. He has been a journalist, writer, editor and lawyer, and began working as a journalist in 1969, has written about politics, public policy issues and legal subjects since he first reported on Australian federal politics in 1971. At various times he's written for the Canberra Times, the Nation Review, the Advertiser, the Age, the Australian Financial Review and the Adelaide Review, and the online newsletter Crikey, as well as doing news commentaries and talks for the ABC. For several years, he also wrote the Mind Your Language column for the Adelaide Review, and I think there's a few of us who are old enough to appreciate the value of a Mind Your Language column. Apart from his journalism, Michael has extensive practical experience in public policy development and legislative reform for previous South Australian governments and has spent some years in legal practice and brings to this interview a deep understanding of the nature of politics and government. So without further ado, I'd like to invite both Blanche and Michael to come to the stage. Thank you.
This is my safety sort of talisman. I'm not actually going to open it and start quoting Blanche herself all that much unless something happens. Blanche, as everyone knows, this is your 2nd biography of our man. One of my favourite stories concerning him actually doesn't feature him as a participant. It's Bill Hayden, I think at John Button's funeral, telling the story of how Button had got the job of coming to Hayden in late 1982 or January of 1983 and explaining to him all the reasons why it was a very good idea for him to stand aside in favour of Bob. And at Button's funeral, Bill Hayden said that he had regretted ever since that he hadn't had the presence of mind to say to John Button, well, that's all very reasonable, John, but are we sure he wants the job? It wasn't in doubt, was it?
Not really. No, not from birth, actually.
Well, yes, and we know those stories of the family, but I suspect there are lots more kids who've been tipped for the job of Prime Minister than we've actually had Prime Ministers. What was the force, do you think, of the other impetuses towards the job? What drove him?
Well, there's no doubt that his mother was really a critical factor. The family lived first in Bordertown and then in Kapunda, where his father was a Congregationalist minister. But his mother had had a son, and then she wanted a daughter next. But and she used to read the Bible every day, being the wife of a clergyman, and very spiritually and religiously minded herself. And it'd keep on falling open at Isaiah, where it said, "And unto us a child is given, unto us a son is born, and the government shall be upon his shoulder." And she took this quite literally, that she wasn't going to have a daughter, which was a big disappointment, but he was going to be the Prime Minister. But that's true. He grew up with this family expectation, and it was there really from the word go.
Well, because you studied that fairly closely in the development of that in the first biography.
Well, this, I must tell you, Michael, was actually meant to be a continuation of that first biography.
I was going to come to that. Yeah, go on. Do go on.
So the publishers came to me and said, "We'd like to reissue your biography of Hawke. We think it's an interesting period coming up. How about just doing an update of it?" And so I started out, but to just do an update, maybe about 20,000 words. And I found I had so much material that it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then when the manuscript was finished, the publisher and I had to make a decision, or will we publish a brick? I personally hate bricks. Or just do a separate book. So we published it as a separate book. But it just takes up the story from where the first book left off. It continues on to that.
Indeed, because for those who don't remember, there's a postscript written to the first book, which Blanche plainly had to include at the very last minute, and that is an account of Bob's first challenge to Bill Hayden in, I think, July of 1982.
Yes.
And that's where the book ends.
Yes.
And this book begins, in effect, on election night.
Yes.
1983.
Yes.
But as I was saying, you made a close study in that first biography of all of those formative influences. Now, looking at him, as you have in this one, as Prime Minister, how do you think that long period of a sense of destiny affected the sort of Prime Minister he was?
Well, that long period allowed him to prepare himself for the job, which he did quite assiduously in what he studied, which was law and economics, and then in the trade union, in the labour movement, in the trade union movement, he had a great deal of experience with the party and the trade unions, but he was also appointed to various overarching study groups on the Australian economy. The Crawford Committee, for example, which was established by Malcolm Fraser. And so this gave him an overall view over a number of years of where the Australian economy was and where it was heading, which was south.